March 2008, Afghanistan's Korengal Valley. Kyle was 20 years old when he got there, a specialist with Battle Company, 2nd of the 503rd Infantry Regiment of the 173rd Airborne Brigade at Outpost Restrepo, one of the most dangerous places on Earth. 15 months, over 1,000 MREs, triple basic load on every patrol. His squad crosses a bridge at first light. The ambush hits, RPG impacts, automatic weapons fire, a wall explodes next to him, face with shrapnel. Then he looks up at a window across the river, a flash. That's the last thing he sees before everything goes black. His forward observer calls him KIA over the radio, dead. But he's not. He sits up. His squad, men who just watched a bullet catch him in the stares at him like they've seen a ghost. 2 guys grab him by his armpits. Are you okay? I think so. Then run. 600 meters, full kit, enemy fire still coming to a waiting Humvee. His squad leader, Josh McDonough, a ranger, the coolest guy Kyle had ever met, touches his shoulder and says, "Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life." If you're serious about buying a home, refinancing, or just want to know if you can put yourself in a better position financially, listen up. I want you to go check out New Wave Lending. That's NUWAVE Lending. They've got real experience helping veterans, military families, law enforcement, and hardworking Americans, and they've built a dedicated team specifically for our Vanguard Wall listeners. That means real people, real answers, and no getting passed around like a transaction. If you bought a home in the last 1 to 4 years, rates may have moved enough that it's worth running the numbers. And if you're planning to buy in the next 6 to 12 months, they can help you get fully prepared before the right house hits the market. They'll break it down straight, real costs, real options, and whether the move actually makes sense for you. They also built a dedicated landing page just for our Vanguard Wall listeners. So click the link in the description or the show notes and get connected directly with the team taking care of our audience. New Wave Lending, trusted people, solid guidance, and a team built for our community.
I claim Wisconsin as a grow-up point, but in reality, I was a military brat. My dad was in the Army for most of my childhood. So I lived at Fort Lewis in Tacoma. That's where I went to kindergarten. I lived at Fort Bragg. When we were down there, I went to elementary school on Honeycutt by the Fort Bragg Federal Credit Union. And, we lived on on-post housing, so I would walk to school every day and walk home. So we moved around. He got out when I was, 9 or 10, I guess, and we stayed in North Carolina for a little while, then relocated back to Wisconsin. He became a union electrician. We relocated back to Wisconsin, where I'm from, moved to a small town there, and that's how it came up. But, I got my love for the military. My father took me into I think it was a CQ or a staff duty office when I was probably 5 or 6. And he was talking to some guys, and, 5 or 6-year-olds not paying attention. And I walk across over to a rack of pamphlets, like recruiting pamphlets, and there was 3 on there that I remember. And I still have them to this day. They were the real heavy-duty pamphlets that they clipped into each other. So you could unclip them, and they rolled out to like 9 panels. And there was an airborne one. It showed like mass tac jumps and all this stuff. There was a ranger one, and there was dudes like with their faces painted on a Zodiac paddling. And there was an SF one. And it was some random dude in a green beret peeling a snake. And I was like, that's it. I'm doing that. Like one day I will do that. And I still have those pamphlets. I've saved them my entire life. So early on, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
What'd your dad do in the military?
He was an artillery guy.
What was your relationship with your father like growing up?
It was tense, Now being a father, I completely get it. But, when you're young, you're like, oh, man, he's so hard on me. It was tense. He was really, I remember making the joke, like my dad didn't like crinkly money, so he would iron his bills, and I was like, that's squared away. Like he was very by the book, and he was hard on me. He was rough on me. You're
a little bit younger than me. Where were you at when 9/11 happened, and what's your memories of that event?
I was in architectural drafting class my sophomore year. It was that morning class, and I was sitting in it, probably trying to make like a cone or something on like a computer program, or a cylinder or something. And they came in. They're like, "Hey, stop what you're doing," and they put the TV on. Actually, back then it was on like a cart.
Yeah, you would roll it in the cart.
Well, you had like strapped to the cart. Yep. Yeah, and they moved in, and they turned on the news, and we're like, "Is this really happening?" And the normal thing is like, "Is this an accident? Oh man, that pilot sucks." And as it went on and went on, you were like, "Oh no." And I remember deep down being like, "Okay, Like, it's solidified now. Like, this is what I have to do. I have to do this, you know? And I grew up, mind you, I grew up in a they say really small town, but Wisconsin is a strange place because everybody knows everybody and everybody is related and everybody, for the most part, I've never been to, don't get me wrong, I love my Wisconsin folk, but I've never been to a more disconnected place when they understand about the military and stuff. They're very internal with what they know, what they understand, and their understanding of the outside world. I bet you if you look, Wisconsin has probably one of the lowest passport or other country travel rates of any state because it's just all inside. And a dude that is a popular kid in high school, it's because his family owns whatever big restaurant or whatever big shop or whatever big business in town, and they've owned it for the last 100 years. And you know that he's going to graduate, he's the star on the football team, and he's going to take that over. It's just that cycle. And I wanted to get out, and I was like, this is my opportunity to leave. You know, to leave this all behind.
When did you first seriously start considering joining the military?
It had to have been that week. I was like, okay, it's done. Like, I didn't find myself, you know, I had dabbled in the college a little bit, and I was like, all right, no, I know exactly what I'm gonna do.
You guys knew a deployment was coming? And
yeah, we had known. First it was Iraq. We had trained for Iraq. We had gone to Graf or Hohenfels, Germany, one of the bases. We had done one of those like huge wartime scenarios where the role players look like Iraqis, the villagers look like Iraqis. You wear the beeping miles gear, you know, the laser guns. And we had prepped for Iraq. And then I don't know how long the higher powers could tell you, but how long after we got back, they switched it to Afghanistan. And it was a brief, and I remember it was in the theater of Italy. They had platoons there, maybe it was just squad leaders, I don't remember, it was all lined up, and I stood in the back with the command team.
The battalion command team?
Yeah. So we had to go there with them, and I'm in the back, and he's giving briefs on everywhere, the locations and the kind of the loose mission sets that everybody would have, right? And it was like, you know, you chosen company, you're going to be here. Able company, you're going to be doing this. You're going to be on this highway. You're going to do this. And it got to battle company, and they were doing it by platoon. And I don't know what it was, but the guy said, second platoon battle company, you guys are pretty much going to go and be bait in the Korengal Valley. And I remember the word bait, and I was like, bait? Oh man, like that's intense, dude. And didn't know what it meant until you got there, and you're like, oh, I see what he meant. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, bait. Oh.
Yeah, bait, like fishing bait.
Yeah, and I think like 05, 6, 7, man, I mean, that's still Iraq focused. You got Fallujah, Ramadi. I don't remember Afghanistan being super on the radar.
No, and nobody wanted to go to Afghanistan because Iraq was the huge focus. WMDs, all this stuff. And you felt like you were taking a back seat in the war. You're like, oh man, we're going to the forgotten part. Like nothing's going to happen. But, you know, the guys that have been to the OAF6 were like, no, there's things happening. It's just not publicized. We're like, okay, I'm hoping for something good. So they gave us a little bit, some tidbits. You know, I wrote letters to my family, and I wrote letters to you know, I wrote my death letters and kept them on me and stuff like that. And this is what we're going to do. But we were all really excited, man. We were young. We wanted to prove our mettle, you know, our grit. And we were fired up to do it, man. So
you guys deploy. Where did you go initially with the command team? Where was the command headquartered out?
Camp Blessing. Yeah, Camp Blessing, which is hilarious because they had at the very end of Camp Blessing, these big, huge, like iron rod garage doors, and SF was in there. And it was a 7th group team. And it was a 7th group team that I now know most of them. But I remember seeing them in the chow hall there with like pistols in their belt loops, and I was like, oh my God, those are the coolest guys ever, you know?
Where was Blessing at?
Nangarhar.
You guys flying or driving?
Driving, everywhere. And because it was all flat, other than the Korengal Valley. They would not go and see Battle Company. I never got to see Battle Company until... No, you know what? I take that back. We went once to the COP, to the lower part of it, but nothing high up had been built yet. So they were all staying in that lower part. But whether it was Hanukkah Miracle, which used to be close to Fobb, Michigan, I believe, and it was on one of the highways, we would just drive around and see different people, different, you know, companies and platoons and what they were doing. And I was so jealous. I was like, man, I can't wait to get in the fight. Like, this is killing me.
So if you could, man, you know, going back in your mind, like you just said, like a cereal bowl, can you describe like your environment where, you know, even before you guys went up to the top of the mountain, like what that was? Because I think, you know, I just watched Restrepo the other day and a little bit of Korengal. Like, you know, it's really hard to put it in words, but the best you can.
Yeah. I mean, we continued to build stuff up. So we worked. So like that documentary, both of those documentaries are a little misleading because you'll see a part where right towards the end, we got like a little bit of a chow hall at the base of the valley at the cop, and then you had like deep fryers and stuff, but we didn't have that for like 10 or 12 months. You know, they started really increasing the support we got toward the end. You see that, and you see Jones and a couple other people like hanging out in the chow hall being like, hey, you know, we've got like muffins and stuff. And that was when we got to go down to the cop. But the cop was just in this bowl. It had plywood hooches for a while, and then while they started building like the concrete stucco kind of buildings with the wood doors and stuff like that. We stayed in these huts, and it was all, they had little OPs set out everywhere, and you were always watching the wire. There was tons of sea wire. It was straight like a Vietnam camp. It was really rudimentary.
So were you guys at the base of a mountain, or were you guys further up the mountain initially?
We were further up the mountain, but we were like mid-level, because there was some ways that went down, and it cleared out to this big pan where there was Dangam, Marasana, Alibad, Babial. There was like a few little villages that went down and followed the river with a trail. You could drive up to the cop, and you could drive up to a certain point with those villages passing on either side of you, but then you would reach around the 6-2 grid line, and you would reach the base of Korengal, and you really couldn't go much further. You would end up tumbling down gullies and stuff. It was a major hub and a route for transportation of lumber. And I might be wrong about this, but to my knowledge, that's why they wanted to focus on it, because apparently a lot of the weapons and ammunition and war materials were being smuggled in these lumber shipments, huge lumber shipments, like big railroad ties. And it's true, because we ended up shooting at them a couple times, and you'd be like, oh man, there's stuff in there. One would blow up randomly, like hugely, and you're like, okay, that definitely is not just wood.
When you say they're bringing in lumber, are they bringing in rail cars, donkeys, trucks?
Like big trucks, huge trucks. Yeah, just lumber nonstop. On you know how they like stack it up with the pikes on the side, and that's how it would be. You know, and I've got a good number of firefights where we destroyed one or one broke down, and I'm like behind this huge pile of wood, and just getting chipped wood at you. But yeah, it was a real. I couldn't tell you if it was a strategic position, because I don't have a whole lot of memories actually from the base. I know there was a lot of bunker. We had built a lot of bunkers, a lot of Hescos. It was surrounded by Hescos. But again, the Hescos, they came in waves. Like sometimes we didn't have them at first, then we filled them. But a lot of bunkers.
Did you guys run any OPs farther up the mountain, like higher, or were you guys all just co-located in that one little fire base? Or
at the cop, there was a few that were a little bit higher here and there, and then I might be wrong. I think Vegas was being put in, and Vegas was on the other side of the valley. You couldn't really drive there either, I don't think, but that was really high up, and it could overlook the cop, and it was on the complete opposite side of the valley as Restrepo was, and they were putting that in. First platoon was putting that in, and so they had a good overwatch position. They got into a lot of good ticks too, and I think that was already put in or being put in when we got there. But yeah, I stayed at the base of the valley and really didn't know about Restrepo, and I knew because, like I said, I'd only been there a couple of weeks. We'd done some presence patrols, some blocking positions, couple ambush sites, gotten in some ticks, but nothing big to my knowledge, knowing what was to come. But I remember somebody saying, we get shot at a lot from that hilltop, and they pointed at where Restrepo would be. I was like, oh man. And they're like, yeah, that's the danger zone. And then it might have been 2 or 3 weeks later, we get the Warno. I remember it was the first time I'd ever gotten it like it's written in a Ranger school format. Like, here's your Warno, here's your op order. And I was like, oh, I'll be damned. And a
Warno for you guys out there, it's a warning order. It's kind of like a, hey, this is coming down the pipe, be ready for this.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, like you guys are going to establish a site up on that mountaintop.
And how high are we talking about? Like 6, 8, 10,000 feet?
I think 8-ish, between 8 and 10, because you couldn't, like, we were in good shape, and like you got up there and you're like, and there were points of it. I remember my first walk, there was, rope tied to different rocks and trees and just down, because you were just like trying to get up this thing.
So walk me through like what a normal 1 or 2 days would be, best of your recollection. I'm just trying to give people kind of like a taste of what a day in the life of a heavily engaged infantry unit was at the height of, the Afghan conflict.
Yeah, I mean, we would wake up and do stand to. You had a night guard shift. I want to say it was 2 hours. You had a night guard shift, and you always had a day guard shift. Even if you were on patrol, you typically got a day guard shift. It was just either before or after. But you'd get up, you eat your MRE. We ate so many MREs, and you'd get ready to go, whether you're on patrol or you're on digging or patrol or guard. And yeah, it kind of rotated in those 3 manners. You were doing one or the other. When you start getting shot at, and it's from multiple angles, and chaos is ensuing. And these like really cool guy operators that can, tier 1 guys can probably talk a lot better to it. But I know you get like zeroed in on a muzzle flash. Like everything becomes super, super clear. And it's not CQB, which, I've done since then, where it's like right in your face and you're shooting a 3 meter or 4 meter shot. It's like, is that a person? And, what am I shooting at? And you'll see a muzzle flash. So everything becomes super crystal clear. Everything. And you're able to like kind of lazy scan the valley and be like, oh man, there's one that he's shooting at us and he's maneuvering now over there. It's really weird because normally when you look out in the valley, you see nothing. You see trees. You couldn't pick out a dude to save your life. And then once it starts happening and you get ramped up, especially when bullets, you start hearing the click and they start hitting HESCO, so you start seeing dust fly, you're like, okay, something happens and it must be adrenaline that clicks on and you are able to really zero in your eyes, like eagle eye. And you're like, okay, there's a muzzle flash, there's movement, It's funny because everything kind of lays across it and then you just start seeing movement. You're like, oh man, there it is. And then when it comes down, you're exhausted. Even if it was a 15-minute firefight, you're like, ugh.
Talk a little bit about, the patrol. You end up getting shot. Like, walk us through that day, if you could.
The sun's coming up, and I remember there was a big, some of the other guys can probably talk more of this. There was a big fight over us exfilling during the day. I don't know who the fight was with, but I remember hearing a lot of people were not happy with the fact that they're like, no, pack it up, like it didn't happen, or they moved the meeting or something. And everybody was real vigilant because you're like, oh man, we're further now, and we infilled by foot at night. So now they're finding out that we were here all night, and you had to come back down off this mountain, go into Alibad, and then cross this bridge to the river, this like rock bridge. So we're going, and I'm not thinking anything of it. And I'm like, yeah, cool. And you come down, you're going toward the cop on the road. Now you're at the base of the valley, but you're way further down the valley, and the road from the cop leads all the way to that bridge. And they were gonna pick some dudes up with some Humvees and take them to the cop to let them walk up the back way. But they hadn't made it all the way out, I don't think. Again, this day is snippets of what I remember. But I'm coming down, and I was probably a quarter to a half way across the bridge when we started getting shot at. And they're like, oh, go, go, go. So we came across the bridge and then button hooked right, and there was like a little stacked rock wall of shale that it bordered a cemetery with like little trees in it. And we get down and we immediately start returning fire. We're catching it from like 4 different angles. Like it's coming from all over, Nipple Rock maybe to the left, but I can tell it's coming from everywhere. And I'm like, I hope we get more firepower. And I heard the trucks were coming with the 50s and stuff. And then all of a sudden, I remember thinking the weirdest thing, because I looked into the cemetery and, they have these like jagged pieces of shale stuck in where people were buried and they're just like carved on. And I could see them just crumbling. They were just getting hit like crazy. So all these headstones were like falling. And I was like, oh man. And I looked up, and then an RPG hit, and then a line of machine gun fire, what I assume was PKM fire, hit along the wall. And I don't know which one it was, but one of them peppered my face really bad. And it knocked me backwards, and my face was like smoky and black, and I was like, oh man, I'm bleeding. I kind of wiped the blood from my face a little bit, and I like sat back up, and it might have been a split second that I went to raise my gun and just looked at that house, and this is what I was talking about with the adrenaline. With the weirdest thing, I could see a figure of a man and a muzzle flash, and it was the last thing I saw. He was aiming right for my nugget, and it hit me, and I felt my head jerk back and went completely green spots for about a few seconds, and then it went black. And then I heard one of the two, which had a radio, call me up as KIA. And
you could like physically,
hear
him.
I could physically hear him. Steiner's hit. And then I heard like, I don't know if it was like KS, KIA or something like that. And I remember thinking to myself, no, I'm not dead. But fingers can't move, can't hear anything. And then it's straight up like Black Hawk Down. Like my eyes opened up with like stuff on it, and I was like, "Oh man, what's going on here?" And then Tanner's face got in my face, and then Misha's like, "Oh god," and they kind of lifted me up by my armpits, and or I sat up, and they're like, "Are you guys okay? Are you okay?" And I was like, "I don't know, am I?" And I remember slowly like being like. And then I touched my head, and it was just like this huge blast. Like, my Kevlar was all frayed and open. I was like, "Oh man, what happened?" And like, brother, you just took it to the melon. And I was like, "Oh, God, okay." And they lifted me up, and my knees were like super weak. And I remember there was this real slow down minute where I like looked around, and they were talking to me. And it was like going in and out, and I'm looking at these trees in the cemetery, and I can see the branches and the leaves like coming off of them. So they were still shooting at us, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? And somebody turned me around aggressively, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Can you run?" And I was like, "Yeah." And like, "Then run." And they gave me like a horse ass slap, and I was like, "Ah." And I went, and I just went in the direction of the road, and they were like pointed, and I ran and ran and ran.
Where were you running to?
So somebody had said something about a Humvee. So I knew the cop was down that road, and I was just running down this road for dear life, I think. And I got there, and then there's a really famous picture of Mac, I think was the one that escorting me, or he had come a little bit after that. And he was like, "Dude." And my face is all black and I've got this helmet, and I take my helmet off, and I'm looking at it, and it had punctured the inside of the helmet, so that was kind of open, and I guess kind of like circled around a little bit on the inside and come out somewhere, non-kinetic, and I was like, all right. And Mac looked at me, and he like took my shoulders, and he was like, "Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life, brother." And you know what the funny thing is that Mac always was a very, very high authority figure in my world. Like I saw him, I put him on a pedestal, and I always felt like after that, there was like a connection that I had with him that was way deeper, because he knew that I knew, like, man, like he almost lost a dude. I almost lost my life, and he was like, "Welcome back." And I remained really close with him because of that particular moment, that welcoming, and that quote stuck with me my whole life.
I remember you were telling me when you got to the aid station, you asked for a cigarette, but you couldn't really smoke it because it was kind of soaked in. When did you realize how much you were bleeding?
Until then, because I couldn't really feel it. My face was like all numb, and it was I was in the face. And I asked, I want to say his name was Jones. He was the medic down there. And I says, "Hey man, can I smoke?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Just wait here." He like did my vitals. He's like, "All right, just wait here." And they were prepping something in the aid station. So I like took my helmet off and like dropped it, and I like slid my back down the wall of the outside of the brick aid station or whatever. And I'm just sitting there, and I lit this cigarette up, and I like leaned my head back, and I got 2 drags off it, and then I was like really trying to hit it, and I couldn't figure out why. I'm struggling. I was like, "Oh man." And I looked, and the had run down my face and soaked the whole thing red. So I looked at it, and I'm just trying to drag off this like wet, bloody cigarette. I was like, "Damn it."
What did the medics tell you about your wound?
Nothing. They like patched up my face a little bit, cleaned me off. I got the iodine, and they're like did a couple tests, like eye tests and stuff. Like, "You all right?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like, "You seem to be pretty good." Not to discredit what they were doing. There's not a whole lot you can do, know. And I was like, "I think I'm good." And you know what, man? This is the truth of it. I wanted to go back with the homies, like so bad. I was like, "Hey, can I go back up today?" And they're like, "No." And I was like, "You sure?" Because I'd really like to just go back up there. And they're like, "No." And I remember kind of making a tussle about it. I was like, "Well, when can I go back up?" And they're like, just give it a minute, man." And I was like, "All right." And they were like, "Just go sleep in one of the barracks rooms with the beds." That we had this plywood barracks at the COP. And I remember walking in there, and it was empty. Had a little bit of gear in there, but it was just like, the Afghan foam mattresses, and I like laid down in it and like laid back, and my neck hurt so bad, and I had a raging headache. I remember my eyes hurting. You ever like stare at a computer for too long and your eyes are like crusty hurting? I remember being like, at some point somebody came and got me. I ended up spending a day there. Somebody came and got me and made me take this random test where they set up a computer at the COP. I remember sitting there, and they're like, "Hey, this is going to flash." It's a white screen with black letters, and it's going to flash letters. Hit the space bar for everything but X, except for X. And it like A, F, J. And it does that, and you're like, and then an X will come up. And inevitably, you were like, yeah. And you did it. And I remember thinking, I remember deducing, maybe it's a left brain, right brain thing. So I had my right hand out, and I was holding it with my left hand. And I was like, maybe if I can put my brain halves together, I could get this right. And I was messing it up so bad. I was like hitting X's, not hitting X's, hitting A. And I was like, "Ugh." And I was like, "Hey man, I don't know how I did," because it doesn't tell you how you did. And he's like, "All right, thanks, we have it." I've asked people about that. And I was like, "You never had a baseline for that. You don't know what my score would have been without the headshot. I don't know what it was for, and I don't know where it went." Now they have all kinds of cognitive tests. I've been cognitive tested so many times because people are pretty into the headshot survivor guy. Mm-hmm. Been to TBI clinics, and they put the little Ghostbuster electrodes on my head to see like the waves and what connects and what doesn't. And it's always all jacked up. They're like, man.
So did that 7.62, did it pierce the helmet?
Yeah. Yeah, it pierced the helmet. And so the inside of the helmet, I don't know how far it went or if it rolled off or how it went, because the inside of the helmet has it, Kevlar is like layered fabric. Yep. So the blast is huge. There's a tiny hole. You can lift it up and see through the hole, and then the fabric on the inside is not ripped, but it's like layered open and bubbled. And then it bubbles in a line a little bit, and then there's a tiny nick on the back side here. So my best deduction based on that is that it kind of went in and either circled underneath the Kevlar or just there and like came out right here toward the back of me. Yeah. I came to fruition in wanting to do more because of dumb luck. I survived. I saw through the window, and I was on borrowed time, and I was like, well, I'm going to make the most of it. So the adversity of me being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but having the right hand on my shoulder and surviving, it meant the world to me, and I knew I wasn't going to waste it.
If you had to pick one moment that defined you and who you became, what would it be?
The realization, people will expect me to say the headshot, and that's true. And whether or not, I think it's a combination of you becoming leader in the Army and in combat, and then you becoming a father. When you realize that somebody is 100% dependent on the person you are and what you do, it's life-changing, dude. Being a father is the most amazing thing in the world. So once you realize that their entire livelihood is resting on your shoulders, you carry yourself differently. Everything you do.
What's one lesson from Restrepo you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I think when I think about my homies, it's that real brotherhood isn't built in comfort. It's built in shared accountability. Shared accountability for what has to be done. And that's what I owe to those guys.
If you could talk to the boys from Restrepo right now, what would you tell them?
Man, I would thank them. I would thank the boys, all of them, for what they've done for me. I don't think they'll ever understand how far they pushed me to be. I was by no means the greatest dude in the platoon, and a lot of them will probably say the same thing, but they pushed me to be better every day. At one point or another, I wanted to be like every single one of them in some form or fashion.